Hey guys, it's Tamara again. In my first video, I talked about my floss stash and how I organize it. I hope that was helpful. In this video, I want to go over the items that I use for my cross-stitch products and just basically how I go about starting and completing a stitch using these items. So first off, I have the basic tools, which are scissors. These ones happen to be vintage scissors from my mom's sewing kit, actually, from before I was born, so they're pretty old. I have my DMC needle threader. Now, I've noticed through watching a lot of YouTube videos that not a lot of people actually use the needle threaders, which I don't understand because they save so much time and annoyance. Now, this one did have a very fine wiry bit originally that came on top of it, which was supposed to be for the super fine needles, but they keep breaking off. I have about 3 or 4 of these DMC needle threaders, and every single one of them, the little wire bit has broken off the top, so I stopped caring. So there's that. I have my needle case, which in this case, of course, it has to have skulls on it because I'm all about skulls. I also have my needle minders. Now these are, I don't know how I ever stitched without my needle minders because they're ingenious. I can't even tell you how many needles I lost or misplaced or whatever the case may be before I had these. These are great. Now, I don't keep mine actually on my projects while I'm stitching like a lot of people do. I'll show you what I do, actually. I bought this nifty little stand. I think it was like $2. It was at Dollarama, and it was in the little electronic accessory section that they have. And it's supposed to be for holding your tablet or your phone even. It's kind of big for a phone, but I mean, some phones like a Samsung, if you turn it sideways, it'll fit in there. But yeah, this is a magnetic, it happens to be a metal frame, so it's magnetic. So what I do, I'll just show you as an example here. This is my current project I'm working on. This is my color legend for that. And what I do, actually, I'll tilt this up a little bit so you guys can see. What I actually do is I use my needle minder and I attach my legend to the metal frame with the needle minder. And like I said in my previous video, because I do majority of my projects without a paper pattern, like I do most of it digital, I usually have my patterns on my iPad. As you can see here, I have my current Pokemon that I'm working on. So what I end up doing, let's tilt that down there, is this is basically my setup. I have my pattern, which I can, you know, work with as I please. And then at the same time, I have my color legend for my current pattern and my needle minder that holds my needle. So instead of keeping it on my project, it's always here. So I don't have to worry about losing the needle even more, which is fantastic. So that's my basic little setup there. The other kind of cool thing is that the needle minder also holds your needle threader if you have one that has the metal bits on it. So that's kind of cool. Anyways, that's my basic setup there. Now, other tools that I have are, I picked up this little gadget, which I think is super cool. This particular one is called an SBF, or the Stitcher's Best Friend. And if I can get the little lid off the end here, which maybe I can't. Nope, not today. What it is, you can see it's got the little bits on either end there. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. Anyways, what it does I bought it at a specialty stitching store. And what it's meant to do is you can frog with it, which is always really convenient because, you know, everybody screws up their stitches from time to time, and having to use your needle or your sewing scissors to take out rows of stitches is the most annoying thing on the planet. So not only is it a frogging tool, but you can use it to help to tie loose threads. You can also use it for a laying tool. So if you're using, like, I don't know, whatever you're currently using, if you're even using a laying tool. But the point of a laying tool is it helps you to make sure that all of your stitches, because sometimes you know your thread gets twisted when you're sewing. With the laying tool, it allows you to make sure when you're stitching that all of your stitches lay flat and even, so you have a nicer finish on your projects. So this will help you with that as well. It's basically a stitcher's multi-tool. It's fantastic. The other cool thing that you can use it for is if you ever have to repair any of your projects. So say, for example, you didn't secure some of your threads on the back of your project well enough, and some time goes by and they come loose at the front. You can use this tool to push them back through and feed them back under the stitches on the back so that you can secure them again. So it's a repairing tool as well. It's a really neat little thing. I wish I could get the cap off so I could actually show it to you, but unfortunately I can't right now. But yeah, I have that, which is absolutely amazing. The other general tools that I find it's good to have on hand when you're an avid cross stitcher is a fabric pen. I have a pink one just because pink. But these are great for gridding your fabric, particularly if you're starting a bigger pattern. Because honestly, gridding your patterns makes it so much easier because it's easier to count because you usually do it in blocks of 10 by 10. So it makes it a lot easier to follow a pattern. It makes it easier to find the center of your pattern. I use this to put the little numbers along the top and the bottom for every 10 squares. So yeah, these are great, and I find them better than the pencils and whatnot, because if you use a pencil, which is what I was doing up until I got one of these to mark your fabric or your Aida, I find that your hand will sometimes get the pencil on it, usually the heel of your hand, and then you end up smudging it and dragging it across the Aida, and it's a bitch to wash out, and it gets everywhere and it makes a mess. These things wash out really, really easy because they're fabric markers. That's what they're meant for. So when you wash your project at the end, when you're finished with it, it comes right off. So yeah, these are good to have. You should always have these. Now I do have a few items as well that I use less frequently, but they're still good to have on hand. Again, because I do 99.9% of my patterns digitally, and I don't have, paper or magazines to follow my patterns. I know a lot of people that do, and they tend to use highlighters to go over their printed patterns to mark off where they've already made a stitch. Now, they have this interesting stuff called highlighter tape, and it comes in different widths, it comes in different colors. This particular one, I have it in orange as well. This particular one is a little bit thicker, so I mean you can very easily take your sewing scissors and just cut this in half lengthwise, and you have twice as much tape, first of all, but also it's not super sticky. So for example, if you have a pattern out of a magazine that you want to use, I myself, with my magazine patterns, if I've ever used a magazine pattern, what I tend to do is I have a printer scanner combo, and what I'll do is I'll scan it and print it out so that I can, you know, keep the nice copy in the magazine so I don't tear out pages or mark up my magazines. But this stuff is perfect if you have a magazine, because it doesn't actually, it's not sticky enough that it will rip your magazine pages. So you can use it to mark a pattern in a magazine, but you can still take it off when you're finished that project if you want to use that pattern again. So this stuff is really cool. The other stuff I like to have, even though, again, I don't necessarily use them that often, there's this stuff here called Fray Check. Everybody knows about this. I've only used this maybe twice in my entire life. And this is just basically for people that care if their threads start, or not their threads, but the fibers of your woven Aida cloth start coming loose and unraveling at the sides, and you get those little strand bits that come off the side of the fabric. Now, I know a lot of other stitchers tend to use masking tape around the edges of a project. Never in my life, with exception to using this as a tester maybe once or twice, have I bothered sealing off the edges of a project. Maybe it's because I'm lazy. I really don't know what to tell you, but I'm not that finicky about it. But I do have this just in case. Now, the thing about this, though, is that you always want to test it on a scrap piece of whatever your current project fabric is that you're going to be using, because sometimes it does yellow. So you do want to do a kind of a tester strip to make sure it's not going to yellow the edge of your project. Now, if I was one of those people that cared about how the edges of my projects turned out, I would use this over the masking tape, just because I feel the masking tape would leave like a sticky, gummy residue once you peeled it off, which I think would annoy me more than the fact that it was fraying. So yeah, I would definitely go with this over masking tape, but again, make sure you do a test patch so you don't get yellow on your projects. Last but not least, another thing that is excellent to have on hand is this little cube of stuff called Thread Heaven. Now, you can use this on regular flosses. I don't find that you honestly really need to, because they don't knot that much, to be perfectly honest. I mean, if you're sewing correctly, you shouldn't have that much of a problem. Like, you'll get the occasional slip knots, I know I do, that happen on the back. But I found a way to very easily get rid of those with my needle. I should actually make a video on that as well. But yeah, this is Thread Heaven. And this is more so for people who use metallic threads or silks or specialty threads that have a tendency to just be irritating. So what you basically do is you just drag your, I'm sure everybody on here knows how this stuff works, but I'll explain it for those who don't. You just basically drag your thread through the surface of it, and then pull it between your fingers, and it's sort of like a waxy, like lip glossy kind of, it's hard to describe. You'd have to feel it. It's kind of like, I call it lip gloss for thread, basically. And what it does is it doesn't completely eliminate the fraying and the annoyance, but it helps. It helps lessen the friction of dragging the thread through the fabric, which is pretty much what makes it makes the thread fray and curl and do all those things, is the friction against the fabric. So this basically lessens that and makes it a little less irritating and makes the thread a little bit easier to work with. So again, I don't use this very often because although I own metallic threads and filaments and I have used them, I don't use them often because I rage quit really easy, and it's one of those things where I rage quit 2 minutes in because it drives me crazy. So again, really good to have on hand just in case, especially if you do work with a lot of metallic threads. But in that case, if you do, you know what this is and you probably own it, so it doesn't really need to be covered. Anyways, the only other thing I wanted to show you was hoops. Obviously, not everybody uses hoops either. I mean, it is possible to stitch in hand. I do it a lot with my smaller projects. All of my Pokemon stuff that I've been doing, anybody that knows me knows that I'm stitching all the Pokemon in numerical order. And for those, they're small enough that I don't usually use a hoop. I just stitch in hand, which is just easier for me. I don't find that it changes the tension of my stitches. I don't find that it alters anything. It still looks just as good as if you did it in a hoop. So you don't have to stitch in a hoop. It's not a rule. But I do have quite a little collection. This is not all of my hoops. I have a lot of works in progress all over the house, actually, that still have hoops on them. But this bag, it actually has little handles on it and everything. I got it at Michael's. They had them for a while, and it was, I think it was around $30, but it came with pretty much every size of hoop you could possibly need. They were the plastic ones like this, the colored plastic ones was what it came with, but it had everything from small to large. It had oval hoops. I forget exactly how many were in there, but it was quite a few. And like I said, it was around 30 bucks at Michael's, and it came with the carry bag that has the zipper seal at the top. It was really cool. So I just use this thing now to store all of my random hoops. This is a random wooden one that I think came with a kit, a dimensions kit. I've got this one that's kind of rubbery, and I bought this, I think at Value Village for $2. Yeah, so I just store all my random hoops in here now. So for those of you who use hoops, you know. Anyways, yeah, that's basically, you saw my setup and the little tools and things that I use to stitch. And yeah, I'll stop rambling now, and I'll see you with another video. Thank you.